Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Ruin at the banks. Open your eyes to the banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution is more dangerous than an army, he said. He also said that every generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Aloha. I think we're live. Are we live, Ahmad?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Aloha. And welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. And today our producer is Thomas Becker, Thomas Ahmad Painter Becker. And our guest is Elizabeth April. And Elizabeth explores the topics of hybrids, those beings who are a combination of both human and alien species. She provides an overview of human and alien past lives and the fact that we have all had past lives before this one, and that we are the sum of all our past lives, human or alien. It wasn't until her first conscious abduction at the age of 18 where she started to come to realize that she herself was also connected to these extraterrestrials through past life lineage. Through channeling, meditation, and many interdimensional self-portraits, Elizabeth finally came to terms with her connection, the information she has accessed, and the reason for her existence. And I think Elizabeth, about 25 now, 24, 25, at this young age, she has already experienced more than a lot of people have in a lifetime and other lifetimes. She has become a source of knowledge and truth to many others and has a profound sense of self in Earth's third dimension. Elizabeth is an old soul and a gifted channeler who has chosen to return to Earth to share her knowledge. Much of her what she talks about is focused on her own human journey, alien abduction, her experiences and challenges. Elizabeth April is a certified life coach, practitioner, artist, a gifted light worker, author, and speaker. And we have a longer bio and more information on Elizabeth April on our website on aquarianradio.com, and there's a link to a couple other shows she's done. When you have some spare time, please go over there and check that out. And there's a lot of photos of Elizabeth. She's a very beautiful young lady. Sasha, Dr. Lessin, what would you like to add?
Okay, yeah. So on this program, we've been interviewing a lot of people that have been chosen as ambassadors by extraterrestrials or interdimensionals who have their soul lineage or even often their genetics. And it's almost like once you've served as an ambassador for a Syrian, when they want your services, that you're recruited again. And so we have. But Elizabeth, you're one of the clearest persons I've ever spoken with who can really access and channel on the spot what the Akashic records are. And there's very few people that can do it. So I'm so excited to hear you again. And this is an audience that doesn't know who you are. So if you just start from the get-go about whatever's most on your mind and whatever's the right way to rap about it, go for it.
Welcome, Elizabeth April.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for having me on tonight. I have been on a couple of your shows before, and just so much enjoy every moment of, the show with the two of you. So, I really do enjoy kind of sitting and having this wonderful, lovely talk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same here. It's like old friends.
Yeah,
I just, listeners, we have met Elizabeth a couple times in person, and she's just as delightful in person as she is on air. So go ahead. Back to you. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. This is a new audience. You were on other shows on our network. And, plus it's also been, your first show was in what was it? September, no, 2016, May of 2016, heading into the first conference on the Alien Cosmic Expo, which is in, where is that? It's Toronto, yes. Yeah. That's where we met in person the first time.
Yeah, I remember, yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because I believe the last time I was on was just a week ago. But, so much has happened in just a week, and I've got so many exciting new experiences to present to everyone today. And it is. It really is. So, it's never a dull moment in my life. Let's just say that. For those of you who don't know me, once again, I am a channeler. That's kind of like the umbrella overview of what you can kind of define me as, is a channeler. And so, I have had this ability of channeling and seeing energies beyond this physical realm since I was born. So I've always been clairvoyant, clairsentient. And just recently, and this was on Friday of this past week, I decided to reach out to a woman who I met through one of my workshops. And she has her PhD in hypnotherapy. And for years and years and years, since I started to really get into, not just universal truth and expanded consciousness and all of that great stuff, but I've also really, once I started getting into the alien stuff and the fact that not only are aliens real, but they're actually here, and many of us are a part of them. And once I started to really discover that, what I've really wanted to do is go back into my childhood. And the reason being is because I know, and it's been this inner knowing within me for a very long time, that during childhood I was abducted. And I have this feeling that it didn't just happen once, that it happened multiple times. But unfortunately, as it usually goes, all of my memories from childhood were actually blocked out. They were completely blacked out, from pretty much 14 years old back. So So yeah, so I finally went to do this, right? And I finally, sought it out, and I've tried in the years prior to get together with a hypnotherapist, and it just has never worked out. So I finally met the right one, felt really comfortable with her. I told her it's not going to take her any time to get me under, because I go under for a living pretty much. So, I go into this regression, and, she's taking me through, I go deeper, deeper, deeper into this trance-like state. And she asked me to go into one of the very first memories that has been closed from me. And so, so I go into this memory. I kind of consciously wake up in my body. I was 4 years old, so I was a 4-year-old little girl. And I then wake up as this 4-year-old in the middle of the night. And to the left of me, because my bed was kind of to the side of the wall, standing right beside my bed were these two short grays. Now, at the time, it's so funny looking from that perspective because I'm in this tiny little 4-year-old body and I get out of bed and I'm obviously a little bit freaked out and maybe a little bit startled, but there was some sort of resonance there. And so, they take a look at me and telepathically they ask me, would you like to come with us, Elizabeth? And I said, yes, I do. And so I actually took their hand, one of their hands, which really only consisted of me grabbing onto one or two fingers. And at the time, in looking up at them in my 4-year-old body, they seemed quite tall, which is really hilarious because they were maybe only a foot or two taller than myself at that time. And so here we are, we get beamed off to a ship. And, once again, this is a memory that I just recalled on Friday. And this is a memory that's been hidden for a while. And so I'm this 4-year-old girl, I'm in my PJs, and I get kind of teleported into this room, and it looks like a classroom. So I've got this, there's all these desks in this, almost like a half circle formation, kind of like a Colosseum style. And then up at the front, it looks like there's this board. And I want to say that it kind of looks like a blackboard, but instead of chalk, you can write on the board with your finger or even with your own mind. So there's a teacher, there's a tall gray Zeta at the front of the room, and he's teaching all of us. And as I take a look around the room, they're all just kids that are in the stands. And so these kids range from, I want to say, guessing, about 4 years old was the youngest. So I was pretty much the youngest kid there. And then we went all the way up to about 10 years old. And so, I'm sitting in the classroom and they're teaching us about everything. They're teaching us about life. They're teaching us about nature. At one point, they had a tree that was on the front of the board, and they're talking about Mother Gaia and Mother Nature and how the energy that flows through these trees on this planet is also the same energy that flows through us, that flows through a river, that flows through, your pet dog. It's all the same energy. And so we were being taught all of this. And then, yeah. And then it goes into some quantum physics stuff as well. We were taught about energy, vibration. We were taught about free energy. We were also taught about healing. So there's a lot of healing stuff in there as well. And then what else? We were also warned about corruption as well. Now, I just want to let you know that we didn't get taught all of this in one sitting. It was actually multiple times after that first time where we were taught many things. But here's what happened. So that was the first time I got taken, and I was in this classroom. I was learning a bunch of stuff. I felt really, peaceful and at home. And then I went back into my bed. It was maybe about 2 or 3 hours that I was physically gone. And then it was about 2 or 3 months later where I was taken again. Once again, this time there was actually only one gray who was in the room. And once again, he asked me, do you want to come with me? And I said yes. And I really loved that it was always my choice to go, and I totally understand that it's not everyone's choice, So I'm really happy that in this life, in this incarnation, I got the choice of whether or not I wanted to go. So, the second time that I went up, it was very different. And I go up into a room that I hadn't seen before. Now, instead of the prior room being the classroom with all the seats and the chairs and the kids and the blackboard and all of that. You know, it was quite a big room, but it was quite also like kind of like metal, I guess, looking. And then, you know, this time I was taken 2 or 3 months later, and once again I agreed to go, and I went up, and this time I was taken to a much, much smaller room, and this room seemed all white. There was no real defining feature of it. It was just white. It was pure white. The walls were white. The floor was white. And there was only 4 or 5 other children sitting in the middle of this room. And of course, they all have, you know, their PJs on, and, you know, I join them, and it seems like I'm the last to join them. And so, you know, there's these kids, and I want to say that this time they go up to maybe the age of 6 to 8 years old. And so I'm sitting in this circle with all of these children. We're not sitting on chairs, we're sitting on the floor. And once again, I'm 4 years old, and there's these shapes, there's these objects in the middle of the circle in front of us. There are smaller and there are bigger objects, and and we weren't really given any instruction. It was just these are the objects, and intuitively it felt like we should be doing something with them, but there was no instruction, and there was also no other grays in the room. It was just as kids. So, you know, some of the kids were taking the smaller, like so there was cubes, there was spheres, and there was also 3-dimensional triangles. And so, you know, some of the kids were taking these shapes, the smaller ones, and stacking them, you know, and, you know, some of them were like rolling them around and like playing different games. And just, I'm watching myself as this 4-year-old just kind of working with these shapes. And so I take this giant square. It's a giant, what is it? Like a cube. Yes, that's what it was. It was like this giant gray cube. And I pick it up, and it feels light as air. It's really interesting. And what I heard when I picked it up was that the gravity was different. There was something about these like specific shapes that the gravity was changed or was different. The atomic molecules of these shapes, and I don't know how else to put it, but to say that they were lighter. It was like a lighter form of the atoms that we usually know to be true. Like it wasn't necessarily plastic, it wasn't necessarily metal. I'm not sure what the materials was, but it was very light. Anyway, and so I start to take this cube, and intuitively, as this 4-year-old, I'm starting to split the cube in half. And for whatever reason, I have it in my mind that I know I can do this. And I know that I can actually take this apparently solid cube and actually cut it in half. So I start with my mind and just kind of pulling the atoms apart in this cube. And slowly but surely, the middle of the cube starts to look more and more transparent. And it's almost like I'm stretching the atomic molecules of this cube to break it in half. And I was right there, like I could see it stretching, I could see it pulling apart. And right before I was able to do so, there was a gray who kind of interrupted and ended up walking in the room. And it was at that point where I became aware that even though they weren't in the room, they were watching us. And so this gray came into the room, and he said, "Elizabeth, would you like to come with me?" And I said, "Okay, cool, yeah, sure." And he said, "Would you like a tour of the ship?" And I said, "Yes, would I ever?" So, you know, he gives me a little tour around. We go to this, it's almost like a green space, like an eco space. You know, there's plants and trees that kind of look like, honestly, like a rainforest in there. And so I spent some time in the rainforest, and then we went back down to the ship. We went back down to Earth, and, you know, I just kind of spent the rest of the night sleeping. Now, every time I was taken, because once again, I went into this regression, I actually went through consciously about 10 times between the ages of 4 and 10 years old where I was consciously abducted. So about 10 conscious abductions in the physical when I was that age. And so after every abduction, you know, I would have this giant gray face in my face, and he would kind of like wave his hand over my face, and all of the memory would be wiped out. Now, during this regression, I asked my ET guides, I said, you know, why is this happening? So why did you wipe my memories? Like, I don't understand why I lost a part of myself that felt so comfortable, that felt like, you know, it was family, like it was home. It wasn't traumatic. And they actually told me that my life, my upbringing, my childhood would be entirely and completely different if I was going around between the ages of 4 and 10 saying, hey, I just got abducted. Hey, I've got these, you know, alien friends. Hey, you know, and I was already outcasted for seeing ghosts and energies and chakras and auras. You know, I was already on the fringes as it was, let alone, you know, having these experiences and walking around telling people like it was no big deal. So actually, you know, looking back on it, I'm so happy that they actually did pull some of those memories from me and take away those conscious abductions. And they actually told me that there was going to be a certain point in my life where I was going to need that information. And they told me that now is the point in time where I needed that information. And, you know, the very last time they abducted me, I was 10 years old. So this is like the Greys, because I did get abducted by the Whites at 18. But the last time that the Greys, my family, I consider them, abducted me, we just had fun. Like, we went into a lab, like a laboratory, where they were testing different energy frequencies. And I was like poking around different energy orbs. And I was like sticking my hand in like walls of energy. And all of a sudden my hand started getting really cold, you know, so there's like, you know, I was poking around the lab. So this was at 10 years old. And it was just, they just took me up to say, hey, like, have fun, let's explore, you know, and they said, we have something to show you and we think that you would really enjoy it. And so I said, okay, like, let's see, you know. And so I'm 10 years old. Now I'm much more aware, much more conscious, much more grounded, much more in my body, much more, like, I guess, human. And so we walk into this door and we go into this little tiny cube, like metal cube, and it literally looked like an elevator, exactly that. But he didn't have to push any buttons, and all of a sudden, when the door opened again, I was in a different room. So it was like an internal teleportation device inside the mothership of these Grey Zetas. And so we appeared in this other room, and this was the command center. And so, you know, I'm standing in this room, I'm looking around, and I'm thinking to myself, and of course they can pick up on these telepathic thoughts, I'm thinking to myself, wow, I've been here before. Why does this room feel so familiar? And so this very lovely Grey, and actually it's funny, I had an imaginary friend and when I was younger named Fred. I realized that imaginary friend was, of course, this Zeta Grey, who's my guide, and he told me that his name is Fred. So anyway, so Fred told me, he looks at me, he's so compassionate, you know, this loving vibration, and he told me, he said, you know, this used to be your command center. And I run over to this chair, and it's like this chair with this huge desk in the middle of this room, like this command center. And there's all these other desks and all these other individuals. There's some Palladians, there's some Greys, you know, there's a mantis being in the corner. And so I run over to this chair and this desk, and I said, this is where I used to be. And he looks at me and says, yes. And so I'm looking at this panel that's in front of this chair, and I look back and I say, you've upgraded. And he chuckles and he says, yes. Because, you know, for those of you who don't know this story, you know, I was the ambassador for the Greys. So for the entire Grey species, I was the ambassador for about 400 to 500 human years, even though I lived about 600 human years in that lifetime. So I was the ambassador for, you know, a solid amount of time, way back in the day, at the dawning of, you know, human history. I was this Grey ambassador. And that was me at 10 years old getting reintroduced to this control center and this command panel. And it was so funny that I recognized right away, I'm like, you know, I've sat here before. I've been here for close to 500 years, but this panel looked very different. So I recognized right away that the technology had changed, and it was very high tech, very upgraded. But I knew what did what. Like, I knew if I wanted to fly the ship, I could fly it. If I wanted to stretch something out, I could do that. If I wanted to, you know, ask someone to do something, like, I could do that as well. Like, I was so comfortable, and I even sat in the chair, which I thought was hilarious because here my legs are just absolutely dangling, can't touch the ground at all, even if I wanted to. And I'm so used to being this giant, 7.5-foot gray being. So the last time I was on that ship, sitting in that chair, I was in a completely different body. And then, when I was 10 years old at that time, when I was in the command center, I had a really great chat with the ambassador. He said, we're friends. And he said that I could come back, the current ambassador I'm talking about. And he said, he's like, this is your home. He said, you come back here anytime you need to, anytime you want. We're here for you. And I do. I ask to travel over there all the time to the command center, and I talk to them, and, I get downloads from the current ambassador and all that great stuff. So, yeah, but it was so beautiful to re-experience all of those hidden and blacked out memories from childhood. So that just happened on Friday. Me re-experiencing, this 10 conscious abductions, that all just kind of came back to me on Friday. So, that's all quite fresh. Yeah, it is.
Well, I have some questions and comments, and I'm sure Dr. Lessin does as well.
Yes.
But one of the things, I came in conscious, and then they have you go unconscious for that, to protect you.
Yes.
Otherwise, you won't be able to fully experience being human. So that's a blessing. And because you're here to be human, experience it. But when you go at night, or whenever you disappear from your human life, you have your memories. That happened to me at 4. Okay. So similar thing. Went up on a ship. They greeted me like I was, like the ambassador, returning royalty almost. They're just looking at you with respect. But at that point, I had my full memories. It sounds like you had a lot of your memories. For a brief period there, they allowed me to have access to I call it my eternal self.
Okay.
Who I was before and who I've been in many other incarnations. And the focus was on the relevant lives to my current incarnation and to what was going to happen here on the earth. And I was shown 24 different multiverses, which were variations on the theme on where humanity could go. The worst case scenario was the total destruction of the planet. They blew up. The best case was a utopian society where everything was peaceful, and there were 24 variables on that theme. And then I was to choose which one was the one I wanted to participate in, and I did, and I was returned to the earth. I wondered if I think we've talked about this before, but so you were the ambassador. Do they have that ability to transcend time and space and show you where you might be going, and what relevance your life is to that life is to what's yet to come?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you mean current, like present day kind of thing?
Yeah. So your relevance to
that
life, what you're supposed to do here, your mission. I got to shut off my phone. Somebody's dinging me. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's so current. It's so relevant. It was in that lifetime, where I had all these flashbacks of myself as this ambassador. And it was in that lifetime where I remember sitting down with my council, because I had my advisory board, and sitting down with my council. And we decided at that time that I was meant to incarnate here on this planet at this time for this lifetime right here, right now as Elizabeth April. We didn't even touch upon any other human lifetime that I was meant to come down for, except for this one right here, right now. The only reason why this past life of this tall gray Zeta ambassador is so relevant to me right now is because the only reason why I'm here is because I was there. Right? So it's like I'm like living this parallel reality on planet Earth here, simultaneously and on that ship. And a lot of the issues and things that I had to deal with on that ship are very similar to the issues and things that I have to deal with here, but just on a more close encounter way, which I'm here on this planet at this time. And what I've learned is that I've decided to be somewhat of an ambassador on this planet at this time for the human species. Now, granted, there are many of us on this planet, seed planters, light workers, to varying degrees. And once again, I'm meant to pull all of this universal truth, this information, this awakening, this ability to channel, to awaken as many people as possible so that we can choose together consciously, unity, we can choose the reality that we all want to live in. So very similar to your experience, Janet, with, okay, well, what parallel reality out of these 24 do you want to experience and live in? Right now, I am teaching people that we can make that choice, that the choice isn't made for us, that is a choice that we have the free will to make. So I'm waking people up, hopefully quickly, to understand that we've got this free will to choose what reality we want to live in. So hopefully that kind of explains the relevance, is that once again, I'm back here to do the very same work that I was on that mothership to do, which is just help humanity as much as possible and awaken them to the infinite possibilities that exist and are existing.
Wonderful. Sasha has a question.
Just, Elizabeth, what's the function of all this suffering? If everything is part of divine plan, and what we're experiencing now is the challenges that showing us what part of ourselves we have to transcend, it sounds like the suffering is just built in. One of the things that Russell Brenninger and others think, it's to lead us to a singularity where if we can't figure it out ourselves, at least we can make machines that could stop all the war and suffering. And what's your rep on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what I truly understand is that we're not the only species who is suffering. We're not the only planet who is suffering. I mean, you go to many other planets, many other dimensions, many other realms of existence, and you see very similar suffering. No word of a lie. No matter what dimension you're in, no matter how spiritually involved you are, there's still a degree of suffering. And, unfortunately, suffering is needed for us to understand what not suffering is like, right? So, I mean, this reality, this dimension exists on the polarities of, high vibration and low vibration, good and evil, or dark and light, or whatever you want to call it. But what I've really realized in going into other realms and other dimensions and traveling around this universe is that every dimension, every species has their own form of suffering, no matter what that looks like. It could be extremely technologically advanced suffering, but it's still suffering. And it's something that we all need to experience. And I think that you touched upon it, which is we need to experience the suffering to get closer to unity. Existing outside of dimensions themselves, suffering no longer exists, because the existence of the polarities no longer exists. There is no such thing as good and bad outside of a set dimension. But regardless if you're on the third physical dimension or you're on the 8th dimension, or the 12th dimension, if you're contained within a dimension and you're not yet a part of the whole and you're still experiencing singularity, then you are still experiencing suffering. To be honest, and this is a great point, that singularity and suffering are simultaneous. You cannot have one without the other. It is just a universal truth. And we all have to accept that and understand that being human is to suffer. And once we accept that suffering, we can actually release it and move forward that much faster and essentially learn our lessons so quickly that we no longer need to be contained within this dimension. Then we move on to the next dimension. We learn our lessons in that dimension at a higher level, but we're still learning polarity. We're still learning singularity. We're still learning, our own unique nature, and we're still contributing to that source energy. And then at the end of all the dimensions, that's when you get to enlightenment, awakening, whatever you want to call it. And that's when we can self-actualize and once again, contribute to the whole of unity consciousness. But every time we are singular, we are experiencing suffering, and that's just a universal truth. That's not even a human condition. That's just a condition of dimension and singularity.
So the way that you transcend every time is empathy with the apparent other, so that the dichotomy dissolves. And so basically it's feeling oneness with whatever we think ain't part of you is.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
One of the things that I encountered in my experiences is that we as a universe, it's called a universe, have encountered other universes with different operating systems. So this polarity universe of suffering good and evil, light and dark of suffering is just one form of operating system, and we're about to go from Windows to, Apple. And I'm not sure what the other operating system is, but it wasn't until we are where we are in the procession of the equinoxes, cycles within the cycles, and the yugas and Kali yugas and all that stuff, and where we are in this point in time, that we would get close enough to the other universe to view and evaluate the other operating system. And when I was at one of the meetings, they said that we have chosen to, when this cycle ends and runs its natural course, to move into another operating system which won't involve suffering as the polarity for, diversification and action and, creation. So I'm interested if you had any similar type of information, or is that just something? It was in one of my meetings I had with a bunch of ambassadors and people that were in powerful positions that I the human me doesn't know who they are, but when I was there I knew who everybody was and their roles and functions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point that you make, is that this entire universe is on the verge of, upgrading, and that's the beautiful thing, is that it's not just the human species that's going through this major shift. It is everyone, everywhere, in every dimension is going through this shift that we're feeling here. It's like a ripple in the universe, which is so incredible. And that's why everyone says, if a butterfly dies on one side of the planet, there's going to be a tsunami on the other, right? There's this cause and effect for everything in the universe, and something that happens in the third dimension ripples out to the other dimensions. So we are all experiencing this giant upgrade, and it's so funny because I want to say that it was in March of 2017, so this past March, where I did my monthly check-in to the mothership of the Zetas that hovers right outside of Earth's atmosphere. So it's actually, the ship is so large that it can't be in the atmosphere of Earth. It's just too big. So it hovers right outside of Earth's atmosphere, and I go astro travel there every month, and I check in with the current ambassador, and I say, is there anything that humanity needs to know right now? And so, a couple months ago in March, when I did this, the entire place was on shutdown. The entire place was frantic and chaotic and overrun, and everything was everywhere. And I've never seen it like that before, in my existence. And so, I asked one of the workers, and he tells me that there is a corrupt ambassador that has now taken over the entire ship. And it's really funny because at the same time, we've got all this corruption, all this politics, all of these, dramatic moments that are happening on this planet. And there's a lot of, overhauls, and there's a lot of, riots and violence and just mutiny and so many things happening all over this planet. And it really shocked me to see this, higher vibrational species going through the exact same thing of this corruption taking over and controlling, and everyone being in a frantic, place about it. And to have such a species so intellectually, spiritually, and technologically advanced, it really did shock me to see the amount of, chaos and frantic energy that was there during that time of overhaul and corruption. Now, luckily I've worked with, the individuals and the Greys on the ship to kind of, overthrow that corrupt leader. But it's so interesting how, what we see here as a microcosm on this planet is actually happening in different variables all over this universe.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was, you said, in March?
Yes.
And you've been there after that?
Yeah, it took about 3 or 4 months to get it back to working order. Yeah, and it was a crazy chaotic time, and I would be so like exhausted and tired in the physical, and I would just close my eyes, and I just saw my soul, my astral body over there trying to help with this overhaul of this corrupt leader. And really what it was this one tall gray, who decided that the ambassador who was chosen to be the next ambassador wasn't fit enough, wasn't strong enough. Now, granted, it was a female. It was a female gray, which is interesting because there is really no gender, but it's a vibration. And it was a female gray, and she was very, very, very young, but very like top of her class, very intellectual, very compassionate, all of the qualities that we were looking for an ambassador. And I actually helped to appoint her. And then the next thing I knew, after she got appointed as the next ambassador, the entire place got overhauled and overthrown by this one corrupt individual. Which is so funny how that stuff happens in such an advanced species. It blows my mind sometimes. But yeah, so it took about 3 to 4 months to get that ship back in working order. And, we didn't do anything with the one guy who was overthrowing things. He's just kind of in captivity right now. But yeah. Yeah, it was a pretty wild experience for me to be a part of that, and kind of dealing with the physical world and then the non-physical, and just being there and here and kind of torn between worlds, at that point for a while.
What's the world of the like on that ship? What I know from studying the Serpo material, it sounds like at least on one Zeta Reticula planet, it's like Cuba. It's basically everybody gets all their needs met, and they're sorted out by their interests, and they have small domestic families with small domestic family residents. And I just wonder what it was like on this ship. What's their social life, their family life like?
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, it's pretty wild how similar it is to the way that humans work. Like, it's just, what it is? Like, it's not just the way that humans work. It's the way that singular consciousness works. Let's just call it that, right? So when you're in a singular body, what do you crave most? Companionship, So what happens on these ships? Well, there's parties and celebrations, and there's gatherings, and there's community, and there's events, and there's these things that you would just assume that didn't need to happen in such a advanced kind of species. So yeah, so all of those things happen. There are these families, which is also mind-blowing, because everyone's really essentially made in a petri dish. I mean, there's not really any sex organs to work with. So, but there's still this concept of a family, which is so powerful and so strong that we see, and I've seen it, this concept of family throughout all dimensions, throughout all species. So, and it's exactly like that. All your needs are met. There are many of these grays who get put into positions that they don't necessarily enjoy or like, but most of the time, if you really don't like something and you talk to your, manager or your official or whatever as a gray, and you're like, hey, like this doesn't serve me, I'm looking for something different, they'll actually try and accommodate you and put you into a different role. Now, when you get into the hierarchy roles, and once again, it's kind of, almost unfortunate that there's still hierarchy, but I get it for order and organization. But, for the higher, like hierarchy roles, so like the ambassador, the council, those kind of roles are really chosen for you, or you choose them with your vibrational frequency. So, when I was the ambassador, I had a family myself. I had a gray son, and he was meant to be next in line for the ambassador. So there's two ambassadors at all times working together. There wasn't just one leader. There was actually two. They were both given the same amount of power. And that's for really accountability, which makes a lot of sense. And so there's me and this other ambassador, and I just assumed, and we all did, that my son would be one of the next ambassadors because of the vibration that went into our souls connecting. And so we did the tests on him, because every ambassador or every hierarchy role has certain tests that we do. So we do these intellectual, spiritual, and technology-based tests of where that individual is at. It's kind of like a psychology test, but for grays. And so we tested him, And he happened to be way too aggressive, and he had way too much of a masculine dominant energy. And we kind of came to the conclusion after all the testing that he wasn't going to be an objective fit for the ambassador, because the ambassador has to be objective. Ambassador has to be able to see both sides. So we actually put him as the head of the Peace Commission. So we call it, it's like a military, but we call it the Peace Council or the Peace Commission or whatever, you know. So it's not violent based. It's more of like, let's keep the peace, you know, but we still have to have that kind of troop. So he was the leader of that, which really served him and his vibration. So when you get into those higher roles, you go through rigorous testing to see if you are fit in every single way to be the leader of that species.
Only we did that here. We have a different reality now.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a constable like we had when I lived in Fiji. They just send fighters home instead of arresting them.
Oh, yeah. I see. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. Now, I just wanted to go back with something there. My friend Teresa, who's been on huge motherships, and they're very well organized, and hers, there were some grays, but mostly humanoid species, but different skin tones. Okay. And different amounts of fingers. They were bipedal with, posing finger, and, walked on two legs, and they had a face with eyes that were in front, all those basic things. What she said is that what she experienced when she was up on board ship is that anything she thought was made manifest instantly. So they had whole areas just like malls with restaurants and movie theaters and, bowling and things that you wanted to do. And so she and her husband were on board together, and so they went down, and he says, "Oh, I feel like having a hamburger." And they went to a restaurant, and he was served. It was like enhanced hamburger. It was best hamburger he ever had. They weren't sure what they were eating, but it was it looked like a hamburger. Hamburger, it's not nourishing like an hamburger, whatever. So, I wondered if you encountered anything, because that was fascinating. I've encountered this with somebody else. Like, they went there and they put on some clothes. That was our guest yesterday. They gave you a uniform or something, and you put it on, it fits right away. Or shoes, they fit right away. Everything, it conforms to your body. So TJ said she went over to the closet, and there were all her favorite dresses there that she would ever have bought. She admired and she wanted to buy, and they were there. And she went into her room, and it was decorated exactly how she would want to have her room decorated. And then she went into, they weren't married at the time, she went into her future husband's apartment or complex or suite of rooms, and his was, decorated to suit him. Have you encountered those types of things when you're on board any of these craft?
To be honest, no. I've encountered the way that the Greys live, and I have seen very similar, kind of like it's so interesting, like walking down a hall and you've got all these little shops or these little spots and places and things like that. So I have seen that before. I've seen like the so-called hospital that they have, which is really cool with tons of advanced technology. I've seen the laboratories. I've seen the ecosystem that they have there. I haven't seen a lot of these more humanoid type entertainment, I haven't seen or experienced a lot of that, like putting on clothes. I haven't really experienced that. I experienced how the Greys back in my time, back in the ambassador time, so that was once again, centuries ago, pretty much caveman era on this planet. And I experienced how we ate food, because someone asked me the one day, it's like, oh, well, when you were the ambassador, how did you eat? If you didn't really have any of that genitalia, you didn't really excrete anything, how did you take in your nutrients? And I said, oh, that's a good question. Let's just take a look. So then I get this image of, once again, me as this tall gray Zeta ambassador, and I have this tube, and it's a tube of paste, and it kind of looks like toothpaste, like a tube of toothpaste. It's bigger than that. And I was squeezing out this tube, and this really dark, green substance came out, and it was like a paste. It wasn't necessarily liquidy. It wasn't too powdery. It was like a paste. And I continued to rub this paste on my skin. And then like I went over to this chair, and it kind of looked like this high tech, very modern like lounge chair. And so I lay back in this lounge chair, and instantly these large panels start to appear above me, and they kind of come out, and then this light, kind of like almost like a tanning bed, it looks like. And what I was explained was that the nutrients in this paste were pretty much all I needed to sustain this shell of a body. And once I put the paste on and I sat underneath that light or the UV or whatever that was, my body just absorbed that paste or those nutrients right away. This is kind of a cool moment, but once again, a lot of my experiences are more so with the grays and being that gray body, which like they're, to be honest, like they're quite minimalist. Like they don't really need a whole lot, and they don't really want a whole lot other than that connection, that conscious connection, and working with energy and vibration is really what they're interested in. But, as far as clothing and shopping and malls and entertainment, I haven't really explored much of that on other ships.
Well, I just want to address that. Then you're next, Sasha. Remember what you're going to say. But she said that was for her benefit because she was in a human form. She suspected that once she was gone, all that disappeared and went back to how they lived. But she said once she was there, everything shifted to her paradigm for her convenience, and I've seen similar things. Go ahead, Sasha.
Well, I just want to know what happened between you and your hybrid son. What about that relationship? Yeah.
Are you still in a relationship with your hybrid son or your son?
Yeah, so he actually was manifested on this planet at this time. So I actually, it's going to sound kind of strange, but I actually dated him. He was a relationship of mine in this lifetime, and I didn't have predestined contracts to meet him in this lifetime. He lost his way. Like after that, like when he was the head of the peace committee, he really lost his way, and he went down let's just say like the road of the dark, right? So like that lower vibration, like he chose the fear rather than the love. And so he really lost his way, and he got himself into some tricky situations. So I had to kind of step in, and they actually called it an intervention. I had to step into his life in this lifetime and kind of intervene and get all the darkness off of him and just kind of help him out, find himself again. So there was a huge completion with him. But the really cool part about that Ambassador Gray lifetime is that, so there was two ambassadors, myself and another gentleman another gray man. And what they told me, so when I was sitting down with the council and we were talking about me manifesting into this tiny little human body, female human, they were also talking about who else would manifest with me. They said that my son in this lifetime, so my human son in this lifetime, and it just warmed my heart and made me so happy, and I bawled my eyes out when they told me, is that my human son in this lifetime is going to be the second ambassador who is with me in that lifetime. Because, I was having a really tough time about 4 years ago, and I said, why? Like, why me? Why isn't anyone else here with me? Why does no one get this? Why does no one really understand? Like, why am I alone, pretty much, is what I was, like, questioning. And they said, don't worry, your son in this lifetime is going to be, the other ambassador, and he's going to do really great work on this planet. So, I'm 25. I haven't had a child yet, but I mean, I've seen visions and flashes and future clips of my children in this lifetime. So I'm very connected to, who I'm procreating, who's coming through me, and the other ambassador is going to be my son in this lifetime. So that's kind of a weird swap. And then the other thing that was kind of cool is that my advisor in that ambassador lifetime, so my right-hand man is pretty much, so I had a counsel, right, who advised me, but then I also had my advisor, my right-hand man, who helped me make decisions on a day-to-day basis. And in that lifetime, we were all sitting around the council, and we were talking about who was going to be with me, and we decided that my right-hand man, my advisor, was going to be my husband in this lifetime. And it was so cute. It was so cute. So we're these gray beings, right? We're all sitting around this table, and we're talking about it, and the council said, so we have decided that we're going to put the two of you together in a human relationship, for many lifetimes, but for the last lifetime on this planet, you two are going to be together, and he's going to be once again an advisor for you in this lifetime, in your human life. And it was so cute because Greys, they don't really have a lot of facial expression, but they have a lot of emotion. People don't realize this, that they have a lot of energetic emotion and expression through their energy. And if you could imagine a Grey blushing, like that's what my advisor did. Like he blushed so hard and he was so kind of like enamored and embarrassed. And like, it was just so cute, to see him like so almost like awkwardly uncomfortable that he was going to be partners, romantic partners with the ambassador of that species. So, it was so cute to kind of see that moment. And here he is. Like I just got engaged, so he's my fiance, and so I met him. Yeah, so I met my advisor, and it's so funny because all of these downloads started coming to me when we first met, which was about 2-3 years ago. And I channeled it and I said, hey, like you were my advisor and we decided to be together in this lifetime so that you can once again be my advisor. And I actually call him, instead of advisor in this lifetime, I call him my producer. I wouldn't have the YouTube videos. I wouldn't be on this radio show if it wasn't for him, and he's really directed me and given me the strength to do all of this. So yes, it's so interesting, the turn of events and what's going on in my life right now compared to that past. Yeah.
Did he know who he was before you told him who he was?
No, he had no idea, but his entire life was set up to meet me. Like everything was just in alignment. Like his sister is an ET channeler. So she channeled ETs, extraterrestrials, interdimensional. Like she's like a straight channel just like I am. And so his whole life he grew up with someone who had the same exact abilities as I did. And so that really prepared him for, okay, well, I'm tired because I'm out of body, or I've been doing, whatever it is. He's so open to it. And he was completely well versed in his aliens, extraterrestrials, and interdimensional beings when I met him. So we just went off, 8-hour conversation about everything that he knew, everything that I knew. And the coolest part is just kind of popped in. So the relationship that he had, so my fiance, the relationship that he had before me was about 2 or 3 years long, and during the middle of the night, he would start talking in tongue. So he would actually start talking in another language. Now, what I realize now is that it's light language. So he would be in the middle of the night, stone cold. He would be completely out like a light. And he would start talking in this tongue. It wasn't Russian. It wasn't, English. It wasn't anything that his girlfriend had ever even heard before in her life. And it really freaked her out. And so I channeled it when we met.
Well, we were at the break. So, I was right.
Love story.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
You need some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable senior network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com, at Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Halakas MD, Melanie Vrichton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is. Very dangerous.
Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
In breaking news, a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a 5th dimensional consciousness. They are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances. Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge, Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A, for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitors' peaceful contact and the ongoing project of cleansing the Earth.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning, warning.
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all! See how the trouble you've started? Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right! You tell them I'm coming! And hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio!
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I am your host, Janet Kerr Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and our special guest, Elizabeth April, and our producer, Thomas Becker. And before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over on freedomslip.com and make a donation. Whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated. We do thank you very much for taking the time to go over and do so. Mad Painter, where are we?
We have 1928, and we need 2575, so we're a little more than $600 off, and that's the 24th. So we really need your donations.
Yep. Okay, get over there and do so. That'll be great. And what would you like to say before we bring back Elizabeth?
Well, what we were doing was we're looking at this idea that what happens when you're conscious of the past life involvement that you've had with somebody that's in your life now, especially if you're both aware of it. Can you deal with the scripts that you didn't resolve before this time? It's what an exciting thing that you're into, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I guess my question comes to mind is, how did you meet again? Did you say that before the break? What brought you together?
Yeah. So we actually met. So, for those who've maybe tuned out, tuned back in, we're just talking about my current fiance and the fact that, our connection off of this planet was that he was my advisor during my term of ambassadorship. And so in a lot of ways, he's once again my advisor, my producer in this lifetime as well. And he actually reached out and contacted me online because of my art. And he said, just moved into a new condo, looking to, fill up the walls with some beautiful art. And he's like, I'm just so drawn to your art and your stuff. And of course, all of my art are self-portraits of me as aliens. So, I'm not surprised whatsoever that, he recognized me through my art more so than just through my physical human. And so he came over to check out some of my art, and that's that's kind of how we connected. And like I said, we just got into this, hours upon hours upon hours of just updating each other on everything that we knew, about aliens. And for me, it was so refreshing to have someone who had the same amount of knowledge that I did, even though he was completely unaware of our connection. And of course, at the time when we first met, I was also unaware of that connection as well, until I decided to channel it and say, okay, well, there's clearly something here. I wonder where we've been before. And of course, we've had many, many human lifetimes together to kind of make us compatible. But we've also had, this alien lifetime, this gray lifetime, this Zeta lifetime that actually came to me first and foremost. So I knew about our Zeta lifetime way before any human stuff that we've ever been through together.
So is he a contactee experiencer in this lifetime? Did he have conscious recall of being taken on board craft?
No, and I haven't regressed him. I've regressed him many times for many different things, but we haven't actually focused on any of his conscious abductions. I actually have seen visions of us in the future, of both of us being on a ship, which was really interesting. So we're going to be exploring the cosmos together later on in our life and in our relationship. And he wants to so badly have a conscious experience and be abducted and see the things that I can see. So he wants to so badly be there with me. But of course, everyone's on their own path, their own journey, learning their own things. So, but yeah, so that's part of our mission together. Is going up on a ship consciously and kind of invoking that energy and bringing them here so that they can bring us up.
Wow. When are you getting married?
So we're thinking of getting married right now, springtime of 2019.
Wow. That's a nice engagement.
Yeah, it is. It's, and I mean, of course, wedding stuff, it's so stressful and so human. I want to avoid it as long as possible, essentially.
I see.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so you are aware of each other's roles in past life. You found each other now. He is your producer. What does that mean? He works with you to get gigs for you, or what does he do?
These movies?
Yeah.
Movies? Yeah.
No, I mean, like in this lifetime, he's actually a music producer. So he develops artists and bands and, people who are interested in music, which totally isn't my thing. But he, he just knows what I need to do in my career to get where I want to get to, which is essentially my bottom line, my goal of my career is to reach as many people as possible. That's my bottom line is just, infinite expansion, reaching and touching as many souls as possible. So whether that be public speaking or radio shows or, interviews or whatever it may be, that's kind of where my sights are set. And he tells me what's good, what's not good, which is so, so important for me because honestly, as this very gray interdimensional being, who has much more of a connection to that gray side than the human side, I have no idea what people want. I don't know what they're looking for. I don't know what they care about. I don't know what to look like. I didn't even wear makeup, or care what I was wearing before I ever met Andre, right? So there's these very grounded, very earthbound, very human things that I just couldn't care less about and don't even really think about. But he really allows me to ground and say, no, this is what being human looks like, and here it is. So he really yeah.
Oh, I could hear you just doing satsang, just your rap with good music at the same time, with lots of power and just you've just got the way you rap with the right music would be just the way the people are going to journey and go deep together would set off their journey. Because you already rap clear enough, and so coming together with somebody that knows how to put music with you is going to be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it doesn't just have to be music. Like I can even put out meditation CDs or past life regression CDs, or just, honestly, just channel and record it professionally and put it out there, right? The possibilities for expanding and putting information out there is infinite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds like a great project. Maybe he can get the right music for you to, do your channelings. I actually did some of those early on when we started our radio show. I did some things from I channeled Nimma, so I had her speaking.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
That would be great. That'd be great. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we have about 45 minutes. Where would you like to take us in this journey, exploring your extraterrestrial life and lives and history?
Yeah, so, a concept that I love to talk about and that I really do feel is so, so, so important for people at this time is something called the Mandela effect. Have you ever heard of it?
Yes. Go. Would you please explain to our listeners what that is and why it's important?
Exactly. Yes. So, so the Mandela effect, essentially, this is a term that got started when Nelson Mandela supposedly died in jail in 1991. So, apparently there's half the population out there on this planet who believe and remember Nelson Mandela dying in jail in 1991. However, years and years later, Nelson Mandela gets out of jail, and he actually passes away, apparently again, in 2013, well out of jail. So this is where the term gets coined, is the Mandela effect, where half the people believe or, really truly know that he died in 1991, and then the other half of the people believe and truly know that he died out of jail in 2013. So who's right here and who's wrong, right? And so, there really is no right and wrong with this. Now, I had no idea of any of this information because I don't do any external research. I don't, read any sort of newspaper or look at the news whatsoever. So I'm pretty out of the loop. All I know to be true is what I receive channeled. So here it is, January of 2017 rolls around, this past January, and I'm sitting and I'm meditating. And, as I'm sitting there, I am greeted by this really beautiful, high vibrational Palladian male being. And so he's standing in front of me and he says that there's some really important information that his council needs to tell me in order for me to tell the rest of humanity. And so, I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, great, let's go. So I astral travel. I go just outside of the Earth's atmosphere. And I am, floating in front of this council, and they tell me that they're a part of the Galactic Federation of Light, which is pretty much just like the UN for this galaxy. And they tell me that they are the Palladian Security Council for the Galactic Federation of Light. So pretty much they are around this planet at this time to help with the awakening and the progression of conscious evolution. Right? So they are the Security Council. They kind of protect things. And so they invited me up. I was floating there in front of them. And they tell me that they have some pretty heavy information for me to tell the rest of the population. Of course, I always love this because I'm like, what else can I tell people? So they tell me, they say, actually, go ahead and look behind you. And so here I am, I'm floating in space, and I'm like, oh, okay, sure. So, I slowly but surely, I turn around, and I look behind me, and where there should be one Earth, there was actually two Earths. There was two parallel Earths. They looked identical, and they were literally just floating beside each other. And so I turned back to them, and I said, okay, what's going on? Why are there two Earths? And they proceed to tell me that there has been a shift in the quantum matrix field of this very reality. So I said, okay, can you explain? And pretty much what they told me is it has a lot to do with quantum physics and vibrational frequency. And what they told me is that there have been two competing vibrations on this planet for millennia. And what I mean by that is, once again, going back to the polarity. There has been two very different polarities on this planet, the polarities being the high vibration and the polarities of the low vibration. And so what this Palladian Council told me is that these polarities have been competing for a very long time. And as we all know, that lower vibration or that male-dominant energy has been winning for a very long time. And what they told me is that finally that female energy, that compassionate, that loving, that, high vibrational energy has risen so much so in the past couple of years that those two competing vibrations have actually torn a hole in the quantum matrix field of this reality. And what I mean by that is that the two competing vibrations have actually separated and divided one reality into two parallel realities. And so, it's pretty wild and it's a pretty big concept, but it's so important. And so for years and years and years, like since I started channeling, I would say like for 10 years, I'm still pretty young, but for about 10 years, since I started consciously channeling, I have been receiving mixed messages. Half of the messages that I've been receiving are all apocalyptics. The world's going to end, make sure that you've got your bug out bag, the economy is going to collapse, the political sphere is going to collapse, the environment's going to collapse, everything's going to collapse, and essentially we are going to die in a nuclear war. And so I've been receiving this information and these visions for a very long time. Now, diversely, I have also simultaneously been receiving visions of unity and awakening and free energy and vibration and community and compassion and the end of wars and the end of corruption and the end of politics and, the beginning of a new structure. And so here I am, and many other channelers have also been receiving the same competing mixed messages. So for a very long time, I've just kind of taken these messages as, for what they're worth. I haven't really looked too much into it, but it's always been confusing. How can I see the apocalyptic end of this earth as well as the new beginning of this, new vibration and this new consciousness? It just doesn't make sense how they're both possible. Now, here it is. I'm back at the Palladian Council, and they're telling me that there are two parallel realities. There's two different Earths, and that both of these possibilities are actually simultaneously happening. So here it is. We've split one reality into two realities, which means that on one Earth, there is going to be this apocalyptic end, and on the other Earth, there's going to be this new conscious vibrational frequency coming through. Now, to make things easy, I like to call it New Earth and Old Earth, or I like to call it 5D Earth and 3D Earth. So we all know the 3D, plain old, the cycles, the karma, the complexity, the emotions, the attachments, the distractions, all of that on that old 3D Earth. Pretty much that 3D Earth is the old version of ourselves. Now, the new 5D Earth is all about abundance, manifestation, instantaneous miraculousness, simultaneous time, the loss of memory, the expansion of consciousness. And so here it is. So they told me this information in January, and what they pretty much told me is that a lot of the population on this planet is now simultaneously hopping in and out of these two different vibrations, these two parallel realities at all times. They're just not even aware of it. They're just not self-aware enough to realize that there's these tiny little glitches in each matrix that make things very different. Now, there's actually some really famous examples of the Mandela effect out there. So, I'll list off a couple for those of you who are interested in exploring this further. I will let you know that there's a lot of information and there's a lot of disinformation out there. So be aware of that. I do have a 3-part YouTube video series, just 5 minutes each, so a total of 15 minutes on the Mandela effect, explaining all of this much, much further. And so a couple of the other examples, Berenstein Bears is now Berenstein Bears. I don't know if you guys know that author. Sex in the City is now Sex and the City, or vice versa. There's also a couple of other famous ones, like in Forrest Gump. He used to say, life is like a box of chocolate. I think we all can remember that. But now, go back to the original movie, and it's actually, life was like a box of chocolate. Now, this is mind-blowing to people because, we're so sure that we've seen that movie 1.5 million times, and we've heard that same line 1.5 million times, and yet you go back and it just never existed in this new reality.
And what about Kennedy? Were there 3 rows of seats in Kennedy's car, or
exactly.
2?
Yes, exactly. And this is it. This is the mind-blowing part, that one little tiny change in one reality will flip us into another parallel reality. And now we're experiencing these binaries of both. And I'll explain to you one of my, hold on. So there's actually, the reason why I was given all this information is because it's so important for us, all of us now at this time, to choose consciously what reality, what dimension, what earth we want to exist on, right? What is our vibration leading us to? And I just want to give one example of within my own life where this Mandela effect happened and occurred. And so I'll say the example and then we can talk about this. So I was in my underground garage at my condo, and, I'm walking by my neighbor's car. And so the neighbor's car clearly changed from, their old car to this brand new SUV that was like this bright electric blue color. And I love that color. So I was so drawn to it. I'm like, oh, cool, like a Nissan Pathfinder, Murano, whatever it is, it's this bright blue SUV car. And so I pass by it, I take note of it, I'm like, that's really cool, I really love that. And then, a week goes by, I see them using the Nissan, and a week later, this Nissan SUV crossover, electric blue, has now changed to an electric blue Toyota SUV crossover. Pretty much the same exact car, just a very different brand. And so I'm thinking to myself, first thing that I think of is, oh my goodness, this has got to be the Mandela effect. This has got to be a glitch in the matrix. It's got to be a switch up, but I have to prove it myself. I have to find this out, So, I'm like, it's racking just like on my brain. And then like I go back to the underground garage and they happen to be there. They're just getting out of their car. So I stop them and I kind of explain, hey, I'm your neighbor. I've got this car beside you and I'm thinking about buying my own car. And I was just wondering, if you were ever considering buying the Nissan instead of the Toyota. And they look at me and they've got these funny looks on their faces and they're like, yeah, actually we were, that was our second best option, which was the Nissan, SUV crossover. And I said, and I bet you anything it was in the exact same electric blue color. And they once again, their faces drop and they're like, yeah, actually, that's the thing that we really liked about both of them was the color. And they said, how did you know? And I said, oh, well, once again, I'm just in the market. I'm car shopping, so I figured. And then I asked them, just to be sure, I said, hey, had you ever bought the Nissan? They're like, nope, that was our second choice, but we decided to go with the Toyota, and, we bought it about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and we've always had the Toyota. So here I am, experiencing the fact that they had bought the Nissan, but they actually bought it in another parallel reality. And I experienced that reality for about a week. I hopped into that new vibration, that new reality. And in that other reality, they decided to buy the Toyota. Of course, both are simultaneously, parallelly existing.
And that's, for some reason, that's very relevant. When I was on board the ship when I was 4, and yep. I was in my eternal, I was part human with my 4-year-old human little girl self, and then 4 is a magical age, by the way. They do a lot of stuff then. Mm-hmm. And they showed me, they said that when you return, the first movie you will see in the theater is Hercules Unchained. And when I left, the first movie I saw was Hercules. So in this reality, one was made in 58, which was Hercules, and now that was made in 50. Or now it was like I went to 59. In 59, Hercules Unchained it's something like that, and they told me that, and I'm going, what is that about? And yes. I even put my presentation, and Sasha said, take that out, that makes no sense. I go, they told me to remember that, to just pay attention very carefully. And now all this stuff is coming out about the Mandela effect. So what I think it's showing us is that we are the chooser. That's what they said to me. Remember always, you are the chooser. So by switching timelines, you made a choice, probably for something good for yourself and everybody you love. And the variable between the two timelines that you could observe was the different cars, both electric blue, but different models. So if you notice those things, you might realize that you have switched into a parallel timeline that's very similar to the one you were on. But that little butterfly effect, that one little change that you made, maybe kept somebody you love from dying or something. It's so drastic that way. And that's because you're in a positive intention of love for yourself and all of consciousness. And so it's going to be constantly shifting as we're fine-tuning and tweaking. It's like going down a superhighway with 20 lanes in each direction. And if you want to get from here to there, and here is the one which is Apocalypso, you have to keep driving forward and gradually inching over to the right so you can get out of this Apocalypso freeway that seems to be taking you off the edge of the cliff and over until you can get into the exit lane, into the positive reality where you're going to have a happy ending for yourself and everybody you love. The win for all.
Yep, exactly.
Well, you see, you're changing, when you're crystallizing waves into particles. You change the past as well as the present and the future, and it's just a intellectual dichotomy anyway for the small range of data that we ordinarily access. It's all always there.
See, when I was on the ship at 4, I chose a different reality. I came back, and they did the anniversary of the Philadelphia experiment 20 years later at Montauk, and they took the timeline I chose, and they hijacked it over to the one where Kennedy dies and Bobby dies and Martin Luther dies. And I went, oh, because that was weird for me. When all those things happened, I said, that's not the timeline I was on. There's something strange here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Anyway, back to you. Fascinating. Thank you. Wonderful.
Yeah, so, it's so important for people to kind of wake up and realize that this is happening, and that, once again, just like you said, Janet, that we have that choice, that we have the free will to choose any reality that we want to. And I remember, in university, when I was really getting into all of these concepts and just totally opened myself up, I would explain it to people, and I would actually just drop things off of tables. And people would look at me funny, and, I'd purposely roll a pen off of a table or something. And they said, well, why did you just do that? And I said, well, I actually just hopped into a parallel reality because I did that. And in a different reality, I didn't do that at all, So I really, really do enjoy switching up my reality. I really seriously enjoy it. But then you get into that rabbit hole of, well, if I chose in this reality to drop the pen off of the table, then was it my predestined contracts? Was I already going to do that in this reality? Or did I use my free will to choose to go into a different reality, right? So then you get into the whole rabbit hole of, okay, well, what came first, the chicken or the egg? You know what I mean? The idea or the thing itself. So, it's pretty amazing getting into these universal truth concepts and truly understanding the profound connection between everything, no matter what it is that, these concepts seem very, very different, but at the same time, they all seem to weave this web of our reality. They all just kind of seem to mesh together so seamlessly and effortlessly that, it is a rabbit hole indeed, but it's one where everything connects at the end of the day. So, yeah, it's quite beautiful. And there's just so much. There's so much information to go on.
Yeah, Sitchin in his book, Lost Book Enki, ponders the difference, or what is destined and what is fated. And so that's what it's like. It's like, is that fated? Is it destiny? Are things written in stone? Can we change? Will the past, the future become? All those questions. And I think that we are the chooser. We can choose to play victim or take control of the helm and drive the ship, drive the course. And that's what my mission here is. I don't have any ego to come in and take over and be, queen of the planet or something. But my mission here is to, not just sit in the back seat and play victim as people come and, they seem to take control.
I think you're protesting too much. You'd love to be queen of everything, Janet. I know that.
Of the planet. What would I do? I probably couldn't do worse than what's going on right now.
It's true.
Yeah, I know. I'm wise enough to know I need to have a council and not just leave everything to one person, because when we subparse and we put our consciousness into these little avatars, we're no longer in charge of the whole, information, all the information. We have compartmentalized our brains and our information into these little tiny brains. It's like you have to plug back into the supercomputer, and each part of us has a piece of the information that ties it all together.
If you consider everything to be a part of a system, then everything is exactly as it should be, and it couldn't be any other way.
Yep, absolutely.
Wow. So you're a busy person. Did you uncover anything else in your hypnosis session?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot going on in that session. Another really cool thing that I found interesting was when we were, like when I was 4 years old and they were like teaching me and I guess training me, and allowing me to remember who I was sitting with all of those other children. And when they pulled me aside, they said that I no longer needed to be tested, because I think when they put all of the different objects in front of us, they just were observing us to see what we would do with them, right? And so, like I said, some of the kids were stacking these objects like they were building blocks, right? So, which I thought was funny, because it's like exactly what you would expect a 5-year-old to do, is stack the objects, right? But for me, I'm trying to split this square, this cube in half. And so they actually took me aside after that, and they told me that I did not require any more testing, and they said that I had far surpassed the other children who were there in the same room, and they said that because of that, they didn't want to teach me in a group setting anymore. They wanted to teach me individually, because once again, like, they knew who I was vibrationally. So they wanted to then, then we went into the classroom and we did the one-on-one testing, or the training, I guess, teaching, which was pretty cool. And at a certain point, before I left that room with all the other kids and the shapes and, that kind of test, they gave us, it's so interesting, and I haven't explored it further. I don't even know what it is, but it was really cool. They gave us these energies, and they were like little tiny orbs of energy. Like small, like, I haven't, like, usually when I see orbs of energy, they're quite, like, they're not even like quite large, but they're just like a decent size. These ones were like almost palm sized. And so out of the 5 or 6 children who were all sitting in the room, myself included, we all received one of these little gifts. And each of these little orbs was like a floating little orb, and they all had different colors. And the colors were quite bright. And I remember my color was indigo, like this really dark, deep purple. And it felt like a pet. Like, it felt like this little tiny consciousness, this little orb was like a little pet. Like, it felt like we were just given a bunch of puppies, to play with. And we were pretty much told that this consciousness was going to be our friend or our buddy or whatever it may be, to kind of follow us around and help us out. So yes, that was another really cool kind of visual that I received while I was, back up on that ship, re-experiencing things, at the age of 4.
What kind of things does this orb tell you?
And that's the thing. Like, I received it at that time on the ship, but I don't remember like consciously seeing it again after that. And it might have come out on the ship again, but I also remember that I had a lot of imaginary friends, when I was younger, like growing up, like I had a lot of imaginary friends. Now I realize, of course, they weren't just imaginary. Like, I was seriously talking to some interdimensional beings. And I believe that one of those beings that I spoke to or talked with was that little orb. And it's so funny, because now that I'm even getting into it, I'm just receiving more information here. I love how that happens. You just kind of open up that Pandora's box and everything just kind of sets into place. As long as you quiet your mind, I find the answers are always there, right? But people can't quiet their minds because they're too attached to their human, right? So, but yeah, so, it's just coming to me that orb was a lot less of a pet or even just a conscious entity, and more of a, to be honest, like what's coming through me now is like almost like a radio device. Like, it feels like a radio, that it was like my connection to my gray advisor or friend, I guess, at that time was Fred. And he was like this gray being who was my spirit guide, or my guide, one of my guides, I guess, one of my teachers, one of my guides at that time. And so what they're telling me now is that this orb was actually like almost like a transmitter or some sort of communication device between Fred and I, so that I didn't have to go up on the ship physically, and so that he didn't have to come to this planet physically, so that we can have that device of communication. And I think that was needed at that time because I didn't fully develop my telepathic abilities. I was very distracted as a child. So that's kind of what it was. It was so interesting. Almost like it had a mind of its own, like this intellectual technology. And then I also, when I was around 8 years old, I also went into another conscious abduction where they did a procedure on me. And this is the time when I went into the hospital. So it was like, this giant room, very vast room with all these different devices and machines in it. And I laid down in this machine, and there was like all these like different devices and weird machinery equipment all over me. And there was about 3 grays who were kind of poking and prodding and checking out, my physical functions and things like that, even like reflexes, things like that. And they ended up monitoring my vibrational frequency to see where I was on my path. And they stuck this 2-pronged device on my tongue. And it was almost like a pinprick on my tongue. It didn't hurt. But they actually put something right on my tongue. And when I woke up the next morning, I had these 2 little dots, these 2 little marks on top of my tongue. And of course, this really strange, weird taste in my mouth. But yeah, and I was always curious because that was something physically that I remembered, that I had these markings on my tongue. And then going back into this regression, I realized that they were actually just monitoring my vibration through this machine that went into my tongue. And then at that time as well, they ended up chipping me and implanting me in my lower spine. So just lower back essentially. And it's funny because I actually have a marking that they ended up leaving on my lower back, which has always been unexplained until I revisited that moment. And then I also had a chip, an implant in the back of my neck that they had put in there at the age of 4 years old. And they removed it at that time at the age of 8. They removed that one, and then they put a new one into my lower back. And they told me that these little chips were activation devices so that they could I was going to say that they could activate me later on in life and activate the DNA strands in my body. But it wasn't actually them who activated me. It was me who activated me. So once you get to a certain vibrational frequency level, and I'm sure that you guys already know this, once you get to a certain vibrational level, you actually start to activate these little tiny chips that have been laying dormant in our bodies, which actually allow us to help us to unlock these etheric strands of DNA. And so when I was 18 in this lifetime, right before my other conscious abduction with the tall whites, I was activating this chip so dramatically in my lower back that it unlocked all of these DNA strands. And I started, having lucid dreaming and astral traveling and remote viewing and telepathy and all of that great stuff really started coming to me in droves after activating that chip through my vibration. So that was really cool. So a couple of other things that were kind of weird when I was younger that really got explained. And then the other thing too, the last thing here is just that when I was younger, between the ages of about 4 and 8 to 10 years old, I would turn in my bed. So my parents thought it was the weirdest thing ever, and it was so unexplained. And I had none of my other friends ended up doing this, but I would start on my head at my pillow and my feet at the end of the bed, and I would end the night having turned 10 times counterclockwise, and I would end with my feet at my pillow and my head at the end of the bed. And this would happen, I'm not sure if it was every night that it happened or in just the abduction nights, but apparently in kind of going into it, this is a symptom that other children tend to have when getting abducted, is that they tend to turn in their sleep. I had no idea that this was an actual thing, but my parents thought it was the weirdest, kind of freakiest thing that I would just turn and turn and turn and turn, and I would just be completely zonked out in doing so. So that's not really explained, but of course, in going through almost 10 abductions between the age of 4 and 10 years old, it makes a lot of sense why I would have this kind of symptom.
Wow. I was just wondering if your parents ever said anything or sensed anything, or how did they feel about raising this child that had all these experiences, they must have sensed or knew something.
Must have been taken too.
Or maybe taken as well. Have you ever talked to them about this?
Yeah, I've talked to my parents. It's actually not in our genetic. So a lot of the times they follow families. But, I've looked into their histories and their past, and I haven't seen them, be taken at all in this lifetime, or their parents be taken. So it's not in my family. It doesn't follow my genes. But of course, they found me because I am this ambassador, and I needed these human family members to really ground me, right? But yeah, so they of course knew that I was different and kind of weird and special, or whatever you want to call it. But my dad, of course, knew more so than my mom, because he was just an older soul, much more aware. And they actually ended up writing down a lot of really, they called it cute, funny things that my brother and I would say when we're younger. And, the things that I said sometimes, between the age of 3 and 5, 6 years old was really, really interesting, and definitely kind of abnormal for a child of that age. So that was really cool. They said that I said that I talked to God a lot because I was, raised Catholic. So of course the only thing that I knew that I couldn't see that I could hear was God, right? But I would always say that, God wasn't a male. And I said, Dad, the Bible got it right, or sorry, the Bible got it wrong. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, God, I'm talking to God here, right? And God's not a male. I don't know why they would ever say God's a male. I said, God's a female. God's a woman, and God's a female, not a male. And it would always really frustrate me whenever we went to church, that they would keep saying that God is this he and him and the Son of God. And, it's like, no, that doesn't resonate. It's not right, But of course I wasn't just talking to Source. I was talking to these other beings as well, which was so interesting. And so they definitely knew that something was up. And I remember, at the age of 18, when I finally just kind of stepped in, I activated all my DNA strands. I was totally awakened, and I started having these vivid recalls of myself as this tall gray Zeta ambassador. I sat my mom down, and I don't know why, I just intuitively needed to do this. I sat her down, and this poor woman, I love her so much, and she's such a young soul, she's so beautiful, and I sat her down, and I said, Mom, I have something to tell you, and it's quite serious, and I just need you to listen up. And she said, oh, okay, what is it? Are you okay? Is everything going on? Are you pregnant? What is it? And I said, no, none of those, right? I said, Mom, I just have to let you know that I've discovered who I really am, and I have to tell you that I'm not just your daughter, and you're not just my mother. I said, I've rediscovered that I have this other family, and they're on a ship, and they're actually these gray beings, these weird alien type, typical, stereotypical alien type beings. And I said that, I'm so much more than just what you see me as. And I said, I just really needed to tell you this. And of course, as a mother, that was the most crushing. Just such a crushing, thing to hear from your child, saying, "Oh my goodness, I'm not your mother," and what's going on, and so I felt bad, and she this was kind of an awkward conversation, to be honest, but I needed to tell her this, and so she didn't understand, and that made me feel really bad, and now I felt awful because I told her all of this, and it really didn't work out to any sort of end, and so 2 months later, she has this experience, and she's sitting in her backyard with her husband, and they're having a fire. And they're just they live in the suburbs, right? Not in the middle of nowhere, just the suburbs. And so they're having this fire, and they're looking out onto the street. And so lo and behold, about 50 feet from them, comes down this giant flying saucer. And so they don't say a word to each other. They get up out of their seats, and they start walking towards the fence. And my mom's telling me this story, and this is months and months and months after they had this experience that she told me, because I think there was some fear or whatever it was. So she kept it, for a while in. And she told me, she's like, honestly, Elizabeth, we were moths drawn to a flame. We just couldn't help it. We just started walking towards this thing. And she says,
Wow.
we walk up to the fence, and we're just, they pretty much walked as close as they could get. And they're up at this fence, and they're just staring at this hovering flying saucer. And they don't say a word, but, she turns to her husband and she says, she just points at this flying saucer and she says, do you see that too? And he turns to her and he nods his head and he's like, yep, I see it. And just as soon as they said that, the thing took off and it went away. And it was just all a moment of, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it was. And the thing left. And she told me this. And in that moment, when she told me months after it happened, in that moment, I realized that was my family. That was my soul family coming to visit them to say, hey, they exist. And also, yes, your daughter is a part of us. So, at that time when I told them and I said, please, someone help, help my mom understand the truth behind all of this. Help my mom understand that I am indeed so much more than just who I am. And, 2 months after that, they visited her, in the full, and they visited her while her husband was there so that they could both have that experience so that, she wasn't alone during that time so that they could really accept me for who I truly was.
How cool. Wow.
Yeah, really cool. Yeah.
So what happened to your dad? Did you have the same talk with him?
He was always pretty open. He was always pretty much pretty open believer, which is really awesome. And he actually lives right beside Area 51 now, which is pretty mind blowing. So he moved to Las Vegas a couple years ago. And so he's really always been open. But a few years ago, when I was really getting into really this epic battle of, World War III that's happening that no one really knows about, of the light and the dark energy and all of this, I was really getting into it. I was waging battles and battling reptilians and going to the fourth dimension and the underground city and all of that. But anyway, so I was in the middle of all of this, and my dad's he just didn't. He got it, but he didn't really get it, it just wasn't deep enough, So once again, I put out the call. I said, hey guys, can you just help out my dad here? He's having some hard time, he's struggling getting the level that I'm at right now, right? So, and he's my go-to, in my family, he's the one who would get it, right? So I'm like, hey, can you just kind of help him out, get it a little bit, And so here he is, he's flipping through the channels on TV, and you flip and you flip and you flip, whatever, right? So they're actually, they're PVRing something, and they're going 30 seconds, or fast forwarding this PVR, whatever. And so it's him and his wife, and they're sitting on the couch, and they're flipping through this, whatever it is. And as they're flipping through the channels, just on one of those, the glitches or the moves from one 30 seconds to the next 30 seconds was this newscaster. And as they flipped through the channel, the image that was on the screen during the flip was this image of this female newscaster that had totally graphically morphed into this reptilian being. And they both saw it in that split second. Was literally, they told me directly, they said it had horns and there was scales and there was protruding teeth and there was a tongue and the eyes were sunken in, and they were telling me in full detail of this newscaster that was this reptilian being that they saw shapeshift on TV as they were flipping through. And it was so interesting because they both saw it in the same split second, because as you're just fast forwarding, you're wandering off and you're looking in different directions, but they both saw the same thing in the same moment. And they tried to flip back to relive that newscast, and they just couldn't find it again. And then, he contacted me right after, and he said, well, he's everything that you've been telling me, he's I believe it. He's I just saw it. He's I can't not believe it. He's I just experienced it. He's I'm right there with you. I'm yes, awesome. My whole family's on board. So they both have their own, their own experiences to kind of get them to my level so that I don't feel totally lost, in and amongst my own family.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have just one brother who's a year older than me. He is, the stereotypical millennial. I hate to say it, but he is so disconnected. He is so lost. He is so lacking in so many ways. He doesn't have any passion, any motivation. Like, it's like, nails on a chalkboard to get him to really thrive in this life. And I find that there's a whole generation of people like this who are completely disconnected. It's either you're super connected and you're super passionate about whatever it is, or you're totally disconnected. And I've really had to learn my lessons with him. And I always have the answers for everyone. I can always, no matter where you are in life, I can get you to a better point in life. But with my brother, it's just something that I have to let go and be patient with and just allow him to learn, his own lessons and, just kind of mosey on through life, and learn what he needs to learn. And that's it. And if he asks me a question, then I'm right there to help him answer that. But other than that, I can't give him all the answers expecting that he's just going to awaken with all the information. He has to go through his own experiences.
Well, we're at the end of the show. We have maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. Would you like to tell everybody about your website and what products and services you have? Do you have a book? Are you working on a book? Anything like that?
Yeah, and do you private people that could just benefit from your feedback? Because you're great.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is what I do like full time. So I'm a full time like psychic intuitive channeler. I take people once again from wherever they are in life, whether it be superhuman or super interdimensional, and I get them, to go to the next level and deal with all of that stuff. So I do one-on-one channeled sessions. You can book these channeled sessions right off of my website. I also do 1 question, 1 answer, or 3 questions, 3 answers off of my website as well. Just know that, Skype sessions are international. So no matter where you are, no matter what time zone you're in, I can still reach you and still channel your information. And, that has everything to do with your past, your present, your future, all of that. Your interdimensional, your earthbound, your Akashic records, all of that I can tap into. There's really no limitations to what I can see. So that's really great. So I do that full time, the one-on-one sessions. Definitely, if you resonate with me, check that out. That's just on my website, ElizabethApril.com. And then you can find me across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, I'm there. And it's just Elizabeth April across all of those platforms. And if you're a little bit apprehensive about, committing to a full session, definitely recommend checking out my 5-minute long YouTube videos. I have over 60 of them on pretty much anything and everything that I channel from other dimensions. So please check that out, just Elizabeth April on YouTube as well. And I just wanted to say thank you both so, so much for having me on your radio show. Once again, it's always a pleasure. We always get into the, most fun information. And yeah, it's always so nice talking to the two of you.
We love it. And you're working on a book. We'll wait for the music, so we'll just keep chatting till it comes.
Yes, also working on a book as well. Yes.
Book the book later.
Yeah, we'll talk about the book later. Much love and blessings. And aloha, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message. Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
Your body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed. People working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country is founded on great ideals and principles.
Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.